Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Like many of you, we are here because we are passionately committed to seeing the science advance and every patient who can possibly benefit from cell and gene therapies receive those therapies. Now, we're making a lot of progress towards commercialization, fighting against the grain in a global healthcare ecosystem that was built for very traditional medicines delivery and pills and biologics. And so we want to thank in advance those who have gone first in pioneering that journey. And we are all working together individually to find ways to scale access, reduce costs, smooth out supply chains. But the question we wanted to ask today is give ourselves the time and space we don't usually have in our day-to-day world to look forward and say, when we reach 2025, what will the world really look like in cellular therapy development? And will we be ready with scale? Because at the end of the day, scale is what's going to matter for us truly delivering these therapies to patients. So Sankalp and I are committed in this next 25 minutes to doing a bit of that projection of the future, to sharing what 2025, only 4 short years away, could look like, to providing some perspective on some of the most critical things we are working on together as an industry to solve for the challenges of scale. Will they actually get us there? And lastly, to challenge us with some new ideas about how we might work together to advance this even further. Because as Warren Buffett said, predicting rain doesn't count, building arcs does. So with that, let us start with the most important number that matters, and that's patients. Today, there are 1,000 patients alive in the US, conservatively speaking, because of CAR-T therapy. 1,000 patients. We should celebrate that number. We should be excited about it. When we talked to a number of physicians over these years, and in particular during the pandemic, we were talking to provider institutions, in particular those who are very excited about cell therapy, but were struggling with the financial ramifications of the pandemic. And we asked very pointedly, is this going to suppress your excitement or your energy towards bringing cell therapies to your institutions? And the answer at the time, 6 months into the pandemic, was no, because what we see the effect that the durability and this promise of technology can have on patients. All going well this year, we are approved in 37 countries with a CAR-T therapy and centers in 30, and the market is likely to reach $1.1 billion. So we are off to a wonderful start. But what does this look like in 2025? When we project forward, you can imagine in 2025, 100,000 patients, again, conservative, risk-adjusted estimate in the US alone. We can probably double that, maybe even more if we look to the global environment as well. Now, for those of you who are thinking, what is the scale difference? This is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15%, or 15 times, the amount of patients that we have today eligible for cellular therapy, 15 times. And those patients are going to be eligible because we will have approximately 34 products approved in 6 therapy types. We will have surpassed hematology into solid tumors and potentially other therapeutic categories. 60% will be allogeneic therapies. And we will have individually and in partnership about 25 active commercial manufacturers in this space. That is a wonderful and exciting scaled future. And again, this is a conservative estimate of where we will be. So will we be ready? Well, we can start by looking at how we're doing today. And if we think about DLBCL, although you'll see varied numbers and different predictions, we know we are not actually capturing the full breadth of patients that could be treated today. On average, we'd say it's probably 25 to 30% of eligible patients are actually being captured in DLBCL. And so we went back out, we talked to providers, to patients, to manufacturers, and looked at secondary data and looked at our own expertise and said, will we be ready for that 100,000? And you know what? Our providers don't think so. One in particular chopped that down to 20,000, which is about where our estimates would be too. Maybe we can double the capacity we're at today in treating patients and keeping them alive because we can continue to expand centers. We can continue to expand geographies, but we are not in a position and we're not headed necessarily towards a position to scale for that 100,000 eligible plus patients. How do the analysts predict? We're investing $50 billion a year. There were 180 deals last year surrounding cell and gene therapies, and we are predicting a huge market uptake. But if you look at where the projections really are by 2025, the US market is expected to be about $8 billion, which corresponds very well to the idea that we will be only serving a fraction of the eligible patients. And this number is concerning because it also means that not only will we be missing patients, but it threatens a little bit the investment behind this technology if we can't find a way to scale and also show return in order to develop the next generation of technology. So we are optimists, and we really believe that there are things we are doing as an industry together to shape that future, to expand capacity. Many of you are doing it individually, but we're also standardizing where we can. And so we decided to step back and look at 3 core areas beyond our individual supply chains, beyond our individual access and measures to get us to outpatient. What are the 3 things that we're all working on in order to scale? Community, getting it into the community, allogeneic therapies, which could propose safer and easier administration, and of course, next-gen and novel technologies, which we hope can tip the scales. So before my colleague Sankalp goes into describing a little bit about our projections of these 3 things, we'd love to ask you, there should be a poll in your chat available. We'd love to know if you think these things are going to make the difference in our ability to serve that 100,000 plus patients in 2025. Sankalp?
Thank you, Maria. I'll give people maybe just a couple of seconds to take that poll before I bias with our perspective. We think all of these 3 things will be critically important for us, but they will not be sufficient in themselves to solve the problem of scale that Maria was articulating. Starting with the community, when we think about scale, one of the first things that people talk about is building a network or expanding a network that can get these cell therapies closer to the patients and adding additional capacity in the system. And one could argue with additional safer therapies and with some outpatient that existing CAR-Ts have already enabled that this would be easier. But from the work that we've done in this space, we don't see a meaningful shift happening towards the community in the near to midterm. Before I get to why, a little bit of context, right? Why do we need this? So if you look at the chart on the left, historically speaking, a lot of market for CAR-Ts has come from expansion of the networks. As we've put more and more certified, more and more COEs in different parts of the country, we see that correlation with the market expansion overall here. Now, we need that as we think about 100,000 or even 20,000 patients in the future. We are going to run out of existing bone marrow transplant centers that we can certify to become the next round of COEs. And expansion to the community is the next logical thing to discuss on the table. However, there are barriers here we're seeing and some mixed sentiments from the customers about the future going in this direction. From an expertise standpoint, the big academic COEs, there's a debate whether it is actually safer to concentrate that expertise within the COEs versus expanding that to other community centers and perhaps risking the safety and outcomes with these therapies. We're aware of a lot of the infrastructure challenges in this space, and whether it's cold storage, whether it's nurse training that are cell therapy certified, or whether it's just comfort with high-dose chemotherapy, the list goes on. I think those have stayed true since the beginning, but the one thing that's changed from the work that we've done last year amidst the peak of COVID is the willingness and the interest. What was the optimism in the voice of your customers is now much more skepticism and caution. And they're concerned, they got into this for the right reasons, for the reasons of innovations, for the reasons of doing the right thing for the patient. But they're concerned from a financial standpoint. They're concerned that it'll be 2 patients for which the reimbursement doesn't go in their favor, that could really squeeze their financials overall, all at a time when they're still recovering from the impacts of COVID. We've done research in the healthcare ecosystem, and their patient numbers are likely still not back to what it was pre-COVID. And these are centers that are dependent on a lot of that patient volume today. They're also concerned about the clinical risks, about that one patient for which they're due to an adverse event. If that patient goes south, that could definitely risk a lot of their reputation in the community that they're designed to serve. And so for all of those reasons, it's unlikely that we will see a big shift towards the community. Now, we are going to want to take a different approach than the one that we've been taking if we want to enable this shift. That may be about eliminating a lot of the financial risk, taking some lessons out of how gene therapies are delivered to implement in this space. It may also be about enabling a more inorganic collaboration between COEs and the community to enable some of that transfer of expertise that may not happen on its own. From an allogeneic perspective, wow, there's so much excitement on this topic and so much being talked about. Still, a lot remains to be seen here, but from what we have seen, though, it's unlikely that allogeneic on its own will be the silver bullet to our scale problem here. You know, in the words of one of the KOLs, allogeneic holds so much promise because you have the opportunity to take cells from a donor, from a healthy donor that hasn't gone through multiple rounds of chemotherapy, which gives you the ability to really safely engineer products with much more improved safety profiles than what we have seen, and potentially deliver products at scale. Now, we've seen with some of the existing autologous manufacturers, many of them were challenged to really deliver high quality product consistently at scale to their customers. And if there is a therapy that can, or a technology that can do all of that and also shave 2 weeks from the turnaround time, wow, that technology definitely stands to win. But is that really the solution to our scale problem? You know, so if we look beneath the surface, starting with the time, it takes about 49 days today from an initial patient identification to the infusion of the therapy. Yes, you can shave off 2 weeks, but there's still 5 weeks left of patient and process overhead for the provider to take on. You know, thinking about the provider specifically, there's still all the investments that they need to make from a long-term follow-up perspective in the data and technology. There's still training that they need to have within their institution for storage and management of these therapies. There's still all the clinical expertise that's needed in lymphodepletion therapies that come with these allogeneic cell therapies. So for all those reasons, it's unlikely that allogeneic will be the solution. But there are ways that we can maximize the value of these allogeneic cell therapies. It starts with shoring up a lot of the infrastructure gaps that exist outside of the COEs today, and as manufacturers, we can play a direct role in that. It also connects with taking out the fear of unknown. Today, there's a big fear of unknown with these cell therapies. The providers have barely just gotten comfortable with the existing CRS neurotoxicities and other unknowns of these therapies. Now, with allogeneic, yes, some of those side effects will go down, but there's still a big risk of unknown, and it's incumbent upon us to really build the right clinical management and treatment protocols that can drive a lot of that ambiguity away and build comfort that these can be used at scale by different providers. Now, there's a lot of technology out there being investigated, though, and if there is truly a technology that can show strong response data, that can show really good safety profile and has durability and doing all of that in a way that's commercially easy to scale, wow, we do have a wonder therapy in our hands that can solve many of the scale challenges. But from what we're looking at so far, there isn't one therapy that can meet all of those quadruple aim objectives. Yes, AlloNK has been talked about here, and it's shown a lot of promise from both response and safety. The durability still remains a question. We've seen some mixed responses to the early data that's come out in the space. So bottom line is there's still a lot to be seen here, and data needs to mature more. There are other technologies too, TILs, macrophages, that may have a safety advantage, but they may still be autologous, which means they'll come with many of the challenges of commercialization that we've seen thus far. So where do we stand with all of this then, right? All these three things will help, right? They will help in us moving closer towards the future. But science here is not the solution to the scale problem. Science can get us to approval for these 34 therapies out there that are in development, but science will not get those 34,000 or 34 therapies to 100,000 patients or even 20,000 patients out there. And we think we may have a Concord problem. Concord was the pinnacle of technology. It could get you transatlantic in under 3.5 hours versus 7 hours for the commercial airlines at that time. Concord was designed not based on just on computers, but based on math and optimization. Yet Concord failed. Yeah, Concord had their safety issues and they recovered from it, and we had some of our safety challenges too that we've recovered from. But it wasn't the safety challenges that led to their downfall. It was because market chose efficiency over innovation. The challenge with Concord was it could only carry 100 passengers at a time. It guzzled so much gas that it couldn't really travel the distance. And the prices for the tickets were up to 30 times what they were for other commercial airlines. See the similarities? We're serving a very small set of customers at a high cost with a lot of burden on the ecosystem. And we run some of the same risk of being of the market choosing a more efficient, aka a non-cell therapy option over us, the best innovation at the time.
This analogy scares me so much, Sankul, because the technology, the advancement of the science, the ability to create durable responses for patients, that should win if it wins clinically in the market. And so I love the challenge that thinking about the Concord problem places on us to say, what else can we be doing to build the market, to build the scale within the global healthcare ecosystem to accommodate the advanced technology that we're building in these approved therapies? And to try to inspire us, we took a look at another industry that is currently going through a similar challenge where the technology is ahead of scale, and that's the electric car market. Electric vehicles have also been around for some time and gone through their ups and downs, but we have started to see, we're not sure where it's going to end up yet, but we've started to see some real growth in this space. And part of that is on the backs of companies like Tesla, who, while they are building for their individual leadership positions and putting a lot of effort and time and resources into their own infrastructure and scale, did a number of things to support scaling the industry as a whole, because the Tesla future is inevitably linked to the electric vehicle future. So three things.
Hey, Maria, is there there may be some audio challenge here. Do you want to try just switching the audio? Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay, great. So thank you for that interruption, technology, as we talk about technology. So Tesla did three things that really supported the electric vehicle future. They released intellectual property and advanced to support advanced innovation of all competitors. They created a nationwide charging network with the idea to build a leverageable infrastructure for multi-use. And they went directly to customers in some ways to drive scale through direct customer purchase. Now, let's take a look at each of these and say, okay, are there reasonable applications for us in the cell therapy industry? First, when we talk about IP, what they really were trying to do was overcome the basic rate limiters of that industry reaching scale together. The best example for me is the battery. We all know that there were battery troubles in the early generations of electric vehicles. Not that dissimilar to the questions we faced on durability. The battery couldn't handle as much distance as a tank of gas could. And so when Tesla figured out the battery component, they actually shared that IP out to everyone and said, let's get past this and focus on the next set of challenges. Now, we are not in any way suggesting that you share your IP around your scientific technology. But what we are saying is that let's overcome some of the core rate limiters that are not necessarily in our line of sight, but stopping the adoption of cell therapy at a global scale. Let's take examples like the financial investment required of new centers to come up to speed to actually start to become cell therapy centers. Can we find a way collectively as an industry, with governments to figure out how do we front that advantage? How do we really help them through that initial investment of resources and capital? Can we think about the fact that every institution is being, to some degree, individual case-based decisions? Can we come up with something unique like global MSAs that we enact with institutions so that it's not a matter of let's validate reimbursement up front, let's get them in and we'll figure it out together on the back end with some risk sharing. Let's think about how do we do some of these things differently.
Hey, Maria, I think we've got a chat that's saying it's still hard to hear you. Is there just a switch you can make on your audio?
Better?
Let's try it.
My operator headset.
Oh, this is much better. This is much better. Yes. It may
We
be
did.
This is so much better, Maria. It may even be worth just recapping some of the things you were sharing on the point before.
Okay, great. And I apologize, everyone. You know, the sound worked fine when we did our test run. So the first one was overcoming rate limiters together. You know, I believe that where Tesla was coming from wasn't just about sharing IP. The best example is the battery life. For the electric vehicle market to even have a chance to sustain, the battery life had to at least meet, if not surpass, what an average tank of gas could produce. Otherwise, you increase the burden on individuals too much to transfer into this new technology. Now, the similarity to us is the durability, is the science. But, you know, when Tesla figured out the battery problem, they opened up that IP to other manufacturers because that was a common challenge to the industry expanding. Now, we are not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we share out our IP, that we share out our, critical competitive technology about the assets or the platforms that we are building. What we are suggesting, though, is that there is a lesson in overcoming rate limiters together that are not in our line of sight every day, but will be barriers to this scale. A good example of this is we know for more centers to engage in cellular therapy administration, there is a huge initial financial and resource outlay. Now, is there a way as an industry we can come together to alleviate that burden, to make it easier and reduce the barrier to entry for more centers to come on board? Another example is many centers have to enact individual processes for case-by-case decisions of potentially eligible patients based on things like reimbursement, based on their, can we come up with something like global MSAs that we as an industry assign with institutions to risk share with them at a whole level and say, it's okay, get the patient going. Let's reduce that time together and we'll all make sure that you're whole at the end of the day. I think that overcoming rate limiters together is a big step. And the second one, if we think about the Tesla story, is building to where the customers would be. Tesla decided early in their days to build networks coast to coast in many countries on the basis not where demand is now, but where it's going to be. In Canada, for example, they created a network around the critical parks and hotels in the Canada National Park System where most people will take vacation at some point during the year, the popular sites. In England, they started expanding their charging centers and they've actually put in universal adapters so that any electric vehicle can charge on their proprietary chargers. This is all done because in order to scale, we need to be where our customers are. We need to make it easy for them to accomplish this. When we think about, building for where our customers be, we can't help but think most of our breadth and depth today, most of it has been done by breadth. We've been expanding geographically. We've been expanding into the remaining FACT accredited centers or those who are close to the edge. What about depth? What about expanding on the basis of us as an industry? Should we take a page from dialysis or the early days of oncology infusions and say, you know what, we have to be at the helm of building a cell therapy delivery network. Yes, we can branch into other things that exist, but we need to make sure that that network and those number of beds in the ICUs and everywhere else exist. And so we're going to do that together as an industry in collaboration with providers. Lastly, Tesla directly engaged customers. Now, in the case of Tesla, it was about going to the website, cutting out the middleman of having to build a network of providers, of dealers to have customers go there. Instead, they went directly to the patient. And for us, we're all individually trying to build these amazing referral networks. We're trying to make sure that no patients get lost in the system the way they are now in DLBCL. When we were doing our research in preparation for this conference, we talked to one patient who told us that she proactively went to 6 different provider organizations to try to figure out, is cell therapy eligible to her? Where should she go? What should she do? 6 different providers. Can we directly engage customers at an industry level in a different way? What would it mean if we created a central eligibility resource or hotline? What if we adjudicated patient availability in that way? Now, yes, we might lose some individual brand choice patients together in a centralized referral network. And that is a challenge for us because we are used to developing things individually. And really, as we look ahead, there will be competing products for market share. However, if we move from 20,000 to 100,000 patients, we will all benefit from that much more than those few patients that may qualify for multiple at a time. The Tesla future of electric vehicles was doing everything it could to make it easier, to make the market scalable. I live in a city, I live in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia actually started investing through Tesla and through others, some additional sites for charging stations in the last year or so. And actually it was ironic, my parking lot, I have one space across the street from my house in the city. They decided, because they saw the momentum behind these charging stations come in, that it would be of future value to our lot to incorporate charging stations. And they did that. They did it 3 months ago. My husband and I just bought our Tesla. We would not have bought an electric vehicle if it wasn't right there and convenient for us. We would have probably had to go through many, many hoops and go to many dealers to find a different car. And, you know, while we are talking about patients, we are talking about lives, we are talking about individuals who are on their last edge and hopefully soon will be much earlier in their lines of therapy. It is still, in some degrees, about ease, about volume, about capacity. That is the scale we're trying to achieve. So we hope this is a little bit of inspiration. And if we can work together in these ways, if we can step back, find time from our day-to-day, which we know is so busy, and work together in these ways, we might also be able to help each other solve some of those challenges we are experiencing today. Challenges like convincing your organizations for sustained investment when the opportunity cost of other therapeutics that offer here and now revenue is so strong, when it's so hard to build a network and infrastructure to ensure that the right experience and the longevity of our platforms and investments can support. John talked earlier about talent that is differentiated, that understands the unsiloed nature of this, who have experience now. We are all fighting for and losing for talent. Are there opportunities to learn from each other as leaders, and maybe even to consider some radical solutions where talent is sorely needed to scale in this industry, about sharing ideas and concepts and upskilling together? Finally, next-gen closed-loop data. I think that some of the earliest lessons we've seen have taught us that instead of moving from clinical to manufacturing to commercial, as we have historically in pharmaceutical medicines, we need to really have an ability to shore up our information flow in a rounded way, not only to support challenges we face on the ground with these therapeutics now, but to support next-gen technology advancement. Supply chain is definitely one of the places we are standardized and helping each other, and we think there's even more to be done to not only make us better for cell therapy, but for the future of all of our medications in this closed-loop infrastructure.
Thank you, Maria. Clearly, there's a lot to be done to get to that future and that promise of 100,000 that we started the dialogue with. And we have a lot of respect for all that you all are doing. All the risks that you all are taking in bringing these innovations and cures to the many cancer patients suffering. The good news is that Concord is back. Emirates just announced that they are going to be bringing back Concord on some of their routes starting 2022. There's 3 other aerospace companies that are working on supersonic air transportation solutions that hope to be out before 2025. But it only took them 20 years and perhaps a second stint to get there. Now, you could argue this is our second stint. You know, we've already come from the 30 years of the first administration of a cell and gene therapy to a patient. And so it is incumbent upon us to solve many of these challenges of scale together It is incumbent upon us to come together in different ways as an industry, not just to bring the cures to many thousands of patients, but also to make sure that this industry keeps flying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria Sandkelp, and we're glad we got those technical difficulties sorted out with you there, Maria. Very interesting perspective, and the analogy of the Concord is certainly one that we'll all be staying up, I think, thinking about for a while. So thank you for that. We're right at time, so what I am going to ask you to do is actually go into the questions and address them online so that people can see them later. But before we let you go, we did want to share the poll results with everybody.
Oh, great.
So the question that was asked in the poll was, on a scale of 1 to 4, to what extent will allogeneic novel technologies and efforts to move the community collectively address the barriers to scaling cell therapy by 2025? And so the results that we have seen is that 62.5%, so 63% of the audience have said they'll provide some improvement, but not enough. And the other 37% have said big, meaningful improvement. So the majority feels it's not going to be enough, but there is sort of a 37 to 40% of the group that feels it might be.
And we agree
So again,
these things are critical to progress. Thank you.